Hello game makers, this is GameMaker Rob, and in today's video I'll be telling you how to get good at GameMaker. Let's get started. Alright, so one really important thing that I took on board was have at least a cursory glance at the manual just to check out what kind of functions GameMaker has. What do I mean by that? So if we type a function name and middle mouse click takes us to the manual page for it. There we go. So you can see on the left we have loads of different function names: draw self, draw sprite, etc. Draw sprite ext. What does that do? So it gives us additional options to change the scale, blending, rotation. So just having at least a look at the names of functions on the left, opening all of these different tabs, just to see what's possible, hopefully will plant a seed into your brain so that in the future, when you are doing something a bit different or you want to code something new, you might think, well, hang on, does GameMaker already have a function that's going to do the hard work for me? Because that's what functions are for, really. Just do the hard work for you. Otherwise, you have to code it all yourself. So that's one reason to do it. And the other thing I want to lead on from there is that one thing I like to do to see what kind of functions are available is if, for example, I'm doing text and I want to see what kind of functions are there for text. If you type draw text and then let the autocomplete come, you get a list of all the possible draw text functions. This isn't perfect because sometimes you'll miss a few functions that way, but it's still a good way to find out quite a few. Okay, so the next thing is actually understanding the manual entries when you check it out. So let's have a look at place meeting. So we get a description of what it does. We get a picture of how it's supposed to work. We get told how to type it. We get told the arguments that it takes. All of this stuff is important and helps us. One of the things that people can get caught out on, though, and where people stumble, is what does the function return? Well, in this case, it returns a Boolean, which means true or false. So how to use this function: if place meeting xy obj enemy, then show message there's a collision with the enemy. Just to make this a bit more self-explanatory, we're going to do this. So meeting equals place meeting. This is going to equal true or false. If meeting equals true, or you can leave like this, it's the same thing to GameMaker, then this is going to run. We don't actually know. This function isn't going to tell us which particular instance of obj enemy we're colliding with. If we have 10 instances of obj enemy and we want to do something to one instance, this function is pretty useless. So then we want to look for something like instance place. So if we look at this function, so you can see it takes the same arguments, x, y, and object, but it returns either an instance ID or no one. So if we try and use this function in the same way as place meeting, it's not going to work. This is never going to equal true or false, because it's either going to equal an instance ID, which is something like 1000106, or it's going to equal no one, which equals -4. True or false is 1 or 0. So that's why this code block is never going to run. So how do we use this function properly? Well, we can say var enemy equals instance place. If enemy is not equal to no one, that means we have something like that. That's what enemy equals. So then we can do something to it. So we take away 10 HP, or destroy that particular instance. And we're able to do that because we read the manual properly and we checked out what it returns. So just because your code isn't working doesn't mean it's your code that is bad. It means you may have implemented a function incorrectly. Okay, so the next thing is error messages. Yes, those things that pop up and it's like, oh no, we've got to deal with an error. Get them all the time, that's okay. The important thing is to understand the information that the error message is telling you. So if I run the game, we're going to get an error, and it's going to tell us in the create event of object1, which is this guy. So let's go into the create event. Then it says variable object1 dot obj enemy not set before reading it, and it also tells us it's on line 3. So let's go to line 3. So here we are, line 3, and it's this obj enemy that it says we haven't, it doesn't recognize it as a variable. Well, the first thing is, well, shouldn't this be an object? And if we check our object resources, we can see we don't have an object. I know that in 2.3 you can put objects anywhere. I still put mine in the objects bit because that's just, I'm just used to doing it now. So how to fix this? So let's copy that name, create an object, paste it there, and let's run the game again. And job's done, no crash. So the important thing is just to read it. The information is there. Try to understand it. You're not going to always understand it, but the more you try, the more you'll succeed, definitely. Okay, so my next point is it's impossible to fix your code if you don't understand what caused the problem in the first place and the importance of debugging your code. So there are quite a few ways you can debug your code. You can use draw text messages, like you can see I've got a few here, very small font, but it tells me how many cards were dealt, another card variable, what state it is, actor taking turn, and the size of the monster actions list, because the animations get queued up. Anyway, I use that. I also use a lot of show debug messages. I don't use GameMaker's debugging tool just because I haven't learned it really. I don't know how to use it properly, but I do use draw text and show debug. So in the output of the GameMaker IDE, you can see all these messages are my show debug messages. I have a lot for the initialization stuff, all this stuff here. I don't really need that stuff, but I kind of just left it in because it doesn't really get in the way either. So what does this kind of stuff tell me? Well, we can see that we're getting the next actor. There's one actor in the queue. The ID of the actor that's in the queue. The current actor exists. All this kind of information. And what it does is whenever I have a problem in my game, something doesn't work exactly in the way that I want it to, or the order, because I have lots of different messages. Let's have a look at this one, like show debug. You can see inside this script, I leave a gap. So when this script gets run, there's going to be a gap between these lines of text. It's going to tell me that this particular script is running, and also the value of the argument that was passed to the script. And so if there's a problem with the script or something just before it, I can kind of debug a lot easier. So say, okay, well, this script ran, but path queue was undefined, so there's a problem when I'm sending path queue to that script. So just being able to track down the reason for your problem in the first place is like 90% of fixing it, especially with like medium to big games in my experience anyway. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is developing ways you can use to help you figure things out. So I'm in my pet project folder. I have one for every project that I work on. And here is my Paint folder. So I like to use Paint a lot for visual information. It helps me work things out. So if I open this file here, so to briefly explain what's happening, so this is a way to organize tiles for auto tiling using a method called bitmapping. So you can see some numbers here. What happens is the tile you're bitmapping is in the center, and you check to above it, to the left, to the right, and below it to see whether there are any adjacent tiles. And if there are adjacent tiles, then you add that number to a value. So for example, if we have a tile here and there's a tile above it and to the left, we add 1 and 2 together, which gives us 3, which means this tile here should be an L shape. And you can see, like, if I just draw something, like, you can see, oh, that didn't work very well. So if I draw there and there, it makes an L shape. That's the kind of, tile I want. So just using that kind of stuff helps me visually. But also, I like to use Notepad. So I just, type things out like this. It just helps me organize my thoughts, really. And being able to organize your thoughts and think about things in a way that helps you progress is a skill. It's I didn't think like this before game dev because I didn't need to. You have to be able to think about things in a certain way in order for you to progress. And that kind of leads on nicely to my next point, which is the Yo-Yo Games forum is really useful. It's how I first got my questions answered when I was a GameMaker noob, and that's in the programming section of the forum. Now, you can use Discord to ask your question, but I would advise you to use the forum simply because if you take my last point and you also use it to think about your question before you ask it, quite often you'll come to your own solution just for the simple fact you're organizing your thoughts and thinking about your problem in a particular way. Many times, once I started to develop that skill, I was midway through like a third paragraph, or something, and I'd answered my own question. I was like, oh yeah, that's why. And I didn't even need to, post the question. The other knock-on benefit is if you have a well thought out question with all the information you think somebody else would need, you will get much better responses and more accurate answers to your problem. Sometimes some particular problems, if it's like a really in-depth complex problem, then sometimes it's hard to kind of explain it and show the proper information without having hundreds of lines of code. But quite often, especially with beginners, you'll get questions like the player doesn't move properly or the collisions don't work. There is no way someone can give you the answer to that question just from that amount of information. So take a few minutes, think about the question you're trying to ask. What particular part of the game doesn't work? Okay, so you need to understand how your collisions work if you have a problem with collision. If you don't understand how the collision code works, then you're not going to be able to ask a proper question, really. All you can really do is copy and paste your collision code and say, listen, I got this from a tutorial. Don't have a clue. I don't have a clue how it works, but it doesn't work for me. Could someone please help me understand it? That is, at least you're being honest, and you're saying, listen, can you explain to me, break it down how this code works? And people will do that, people will happily take the time to do that for you. So, as long as you take the time to explain things, people will help you out. And also, like I said, it helps you develop that way of thinking. The next point is try and expand upon a tutorial once you have finished it. to find out how much you've learned. So, for example, when I first got GameMaker like 6 years ago, however long it was, I found Sean Spalding on YouTube and his Asteroids, my first game Asteroids tutorial series for GameMaker 1.4, and I did the whole series. And as the series was going on, I tried different little bits here and there, mainly with sprites, as it was ongoing. And then once this series was finished, I wanted to expand upon the game that I'd made and try and use some of the knowledge that I'd learned. So I ended up having power-ups. I added different ship weapon types. I had a death animation effect, scores, like just added like just different things that you kind of expect from that kind of game that wasn't in Asteroids. And I think I learned some stuff from that. And if you can do that with any tutorial you get while if you're in your kind of learning phase, you will get so much from that. I'd highly recommend you make a backup of the tutorial before you change it, because then if you make too many mistakes and it's just a mess, you can just go back to the original and try again, and you will have learned from your mistakes, hopefully. Some people take longer than others to learn things. It just gives you the opportunity to try new things with existing code that works. I think that's a really good thing as well. And that really leads on to my next point, which is if you can find someone who will mentor you, whether it's paid or it's just kind of a friend or a contact, who you can ask questions for, that will help you a lot as well. Even if it's just, you say, I want to make this kind of system, how would you approach it? And they can give you some advice. If you don't understand anything they're saying, then you can say, well, this is the code I was going to use. How can I make this work for what I'm trying to do? And, hopefully they'll be able to show you how to use the code you already know to do to use it. If not, they can at least explain to you why that's not going to work, I've tried to mentor some people in the past. For some people it's worked, for others it hasn't. I think I've learned how to be a bit of a better mentor as well, because you can't always make people change the way they want to code. You have to wait until someone's ready to change before you can't force it on them. So I think you should definitely listen to what a mentor has to say. If you don't understand, or you don't agree, or it's not working for you, tell them. Just be honest. No one is going to make you feel bad about that. Where can you find mentors? If you go on the forum, there's a list of people willing to mentor. You can always hop on my Discord and ask me. I'm always willing to help out. Don't expect people to always give you code. Some people will give you code snippets. Sometimes I will. But the main expectation is for you to do the work and for the mentor to help you along. I know at least one person is going to be thinking or saying, well, everything you said is all well and good, but I don't even understand the code that I'm looking at. And that's just something you have to struggle with and overcome. And it's the same when you're learning anything new. Like, I feel exactly the same as someone who's brand new to GML does about 3D, shaders, particles. I've got a little bit more knowledge with some things than I have before, but it's still hard for me. I can't do what I want to do. I'm not really looking forward to diving into deep end, but at one point, at some point, I'm going to have to with those different things, just to be able to do the things I want to do. And that's really one of the main drives, you know, like why would you put any effort into learning GML? Because it's going to let you do the things that you want to do. You're not beholden to other coders. You don't have to try and shoehorn different bits of code into your own game. You can just code the whole thing yourself in your own way. There's a couple more things that I jotted down to say, but it's kind of obvious stuff, like, you know, using comments, read other people's blogs to see how they dealt with problems you're trying to fix. But I want to finish with saying, don't compare yourself with other people, because you're always going to come up short at one point. There's always going to be someone who is a better coder. There's always going to be someone who is better at artwork. There's always going to be someone who is better at sound. There's always someone better at marketing. There's always someone better at making YouTube videos. There's always somebody better at anything in the world. Is that a reason for you to give up? No, because then there'd only be ever one person doing one thing in the world, and that's silly. But for the vast majority of you, if you look back from when you first started to where you are now, you can definitely see growth, and that's really motivating, because you might think, oh, you know, I'm still really bad at this, that, the other. You know, this particular thing is really hard. But when you compare yourself as you are now to how you were a week, a month, a year ago, 5 years ago, you can see that it's working, and not to give up. I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you next time. Bye for now.